Alright, welcome back to the cab here. Today's kind of a story time. I know I talk about efficiency and things like that, and I can almost pinpoint it to exactly when I got interested in this. Um, Title of this video is probably going to be How I Became Interested in Trucking Efficiency. Not just fuel mileage, just the efficiency of running a truck down the road. And so this has been a long time ago when the light bulb went off. This is before I'd ever heard of Kevin Rutherford or anything like that. Back then, the guys that I worked for, you know, you just you didn't talk about that. You just ran the truck down the road. You didn't worry. You never checked your fuel mileage, or at least I didn't. I never heard anybody talk about it. But this was 2007, and the guy I worked for at the time, um, he had a dedicated deal. We live 100 miles south of Indianapolis, so he had a deal going from Indianapolis to Statesboro, Georgia. So we had a fuel barrel there at the yard. I would fuel up going in Indianapolis, and then on the way to Statesboro, I would stop in Jackson, Georgia, at the 201 at the Flying J. I don't even know if it's still there, but I kind of had a routine. I did the same thing every week. I'd get some fuel, get something to eat, get a few hours of sleep, and then go to Statesboro the next morning. And so I did this week after week, and I pretty much always drove the same truck. I used to. This guy, he had a really nice trucks. He still is in business and got nice trucks. But back then, he had real nice late model or late 90s Peterbilt. So the truck I'm talking about, I think it was a 97. It was a 97 379 extended hood, E model cat, 336 rears, 300-inch wheelbase, midroof sleeper, 8-inch stacks. The truck every owner operator would want to drive. I was driving as a company driver. A lot of his trucks were like that. He had tried to get all mid to late 90s Pete's. They had to have E model in them. They had to have American class interior and midroof sleeper. He didn't have any flat tops. But anyway, he had a nice fleet of trucks. So I drove that same truck all the time. Never paid attention to fuel mileage or anything like that. Just drove it. We drove hard too. I mean, I was 70, 75 miles an hour, probably all the way down there. So one week, and he only had one. This thing was like the ugly duckling of the fleet, which I kind of liked it. It was, I'll give you specs on that truck. And this was his first over-the-road truck he'd ever bought when he got his authority. He got his authority in 2001. And so this was like, he had some other trucks before that, but he would always kind of just run regional, never really had a big truck. So this was a 99 Freightliner Classic XL. And it had, so of course it had the external breathers, had the stacks up the side, but it had a 12.7 Detroit. It was 10-speed, double overdrive, 355 rears, 270-inch wheelbase. So it was still a big truck. I mean, and I was just talking in my last video about a rough ride. That's probably the smoothest riding truck I've ever been in. Better than a Peterbilt to me. But it was still a big truck. 270-inch wheelbase is still a big truck. I mean, it would take 40 acres to turn that thing around. And so anyway, something was wrong with that other truck, or somebody else was driving it or something. Well, anyway, I took the Freightliner that week, fueled up, did my exact deal. Basically they were the same loads, everything. It was going to a grocery warehouse in Statesboro. So it's the same deal lot. I mean, loads varied a little bit, but not much. So fueled up Indianapolis down to Jackson. It's fueling up, and I know, because I did the same thing all the time, I always knew how much fuel it held. And it's like 50 gallons less fuel went in that truck. I was like, how could this be? I was like, 50 gallons of fuel. And I started thinking of a barrel of oil. It's 55 gallons. You think that much more fuel is burned by that other truck than this one? Because I just thought a truck was a truck. I had no idea. I'd been driving a truck on and off for about 5.5, 6 years at that time, something like that. I never even thought about it. Nobody talked about it. And the one thing about that truck that was different than the rest of them, it had a condo sleeper. It had a high roof sleeper like this truck does. So I knew that their aerodynamics were better. It was 30 inches shorter. which is a lot. I mean, a 300-inch wheelbase is a long truck. I mean, you have a giant gap between the truck and trailer. So the aerodynamics were a little better. Engine was different, but I didn't think they'd be that much different. But sure enough, it was, because, I mean, it did the same thing and drove it the same way. Of course I would have. I wouldn't have driven any slower. And so anyway, it just gets my mind racing, or my mind going about this. I was like, wow, 50 gallons of fuel. So I started figuring up. And at the time, I remember whatever the fuel cost was, like I said, it ended up being at $14,000 based on a 100,000 mile year of driving a truck. One truck to the other was $14,000 different in fuel cost. Wow. He doesn't know. I was sitting there in my head thinking, he doesn't know this. He has no idea that this truck is burning that much less fuel, or he'd have all trucks like this. And at the time, he had 10 trucks. I remember that. And I'd worked for this guy for years, on and off. He had a farm, and I worked on his farm in high school and stuff like that. So we were pretty close, a lot closer than just having a boss or whatever. I'd known him for a long, long time, and so anyway, so I made it back home, and I was like, I couldn't wait to tell him, because I thought, man, I've really came up with something. He is going to be so impressed when I tell him this. And I was like, hey, I said, do you know how much better this truck does on fuel than that one? And he's like, it's not that much. I was like, yeah, it is. I said, it's a big difference. I said, I think it was almost 2 miles a gallon. I think one was getting like 4.5 and one was getting 6.5. And that's not hard to believe, really. And I was like, and I gave him the figures. I was like, you got 10 trucks. I said, that's $140,000 a year you could be saving just doing nothing else but changing your trucks out. And he's like, I remember what he said. He goes, yeah, nobody wants to drive a Freightliner, though. I was like, and I think I remember, I think at the time, I was like, who cares what they think? And it just so happened, this was out in the lot, I remember. And then he had built a shop. Sounds like I'm about loaded. I'm going to have to finish this story up. But anyway, one of his best drivers was in the shop getting ready to go. And I mean, this guy was a super trucker. We didn't pay attention to hours of service or anything like that. I mean, anyway, this guy was a super trucker. He could go to California and back in no time, and did that for years. He actually ended up dying in his truck in California. He had a heart attack and died and fell over in the passenger seat while he's getting loaded somewhere in California, because he had a bad heart for a while. And but anyway, we walk in there, and he says, I won't say his name, but he said, hey, blankety blank. He said, Johnny thinks I ought to sell all these Peterbilts and buy Freightliners. I almost said his name. He just said, he said, well, whatever you want to do. And actually, I got kind of a funny. This was an older guy. He probably looked older than what he was. But this. I don't know what year DVDs came out, but he probably had been hanging on to his old VHS stuff for a long time. And he told me one day, he said, well, my tape player, VHS, the big tapes, he still had been using those because he liked westerns. I remember I drove his truck sometime. I liked driving his truck because he had such a good movie collection. But he said, well, I guess I'm gonna have to. My tape player quit. He goes, I guess I'm gonna have to get one of those things that plays the little records. I was like, little records? He goes, the little movies that go on the disc. I was like, oh, a DVD player. And he's like, yeah. That's what he called it, the thing that plays the little records, which I thought was funny. But anyway, that's what really sparked that. That was probably the summer of '07, and I think I first heard Kevin Rutherford on the radio in late 2008. I remember of course, the grocery hours suck, and I took a load to, oh gosh, what is that place? It's in Hebron, Kentucky. I cannot think of it. But I had like a midnight or 2 a.m. appointment or something like that, and he was at midnight. He was on at midnight. That's where I heard him the first time. Then the sickness really took over because he started talking about where you buy your fuel right, rolling resistance in tires, and how to pay taxes and all. And I was like, oh boy, if I only knew what it was going to cause back then. So this isn't something new. I didn't get my authority till 14, so that was 7 years of thinking about that stuff. So this didn't happen overnight, and yeah, so that's when it happened, and I just thought that was kind of a funny story for you guys. And but if I hadn't been on that dedicated deal, and I hadn't changed trucks at one time, I never would have even thought about it. Maybe it would have happened down the line sometime, but that's when it happened, and I just thought that'd be a good story for you guys. So we'll see you on the next one.